The Consulting Success podcast is powered by the Clarity Coaching Program. If you'd like to work directly with the Consulting Success team and receive personal coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting business, marketing, and revenue, visit consultingsuccess.com to find out more and apply.
Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business. Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm very excited to have Cy Wakeman join us. Cy, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So you are a leadership consultant, New York Times bestselling author, keynote speaker, and drama researcher, which we're definitely going to talk about. You're the president and founder of Reality-Based Leadership. You have many very well-known clients like Google, Facebook, Uber, NASA, and a long list of others. Your work has been featured in Forbes, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and dozens of other publications. So, Cy, first of all, let's just kind of get right into it, because the elephant in the room for, I think, many people is, what is a drama researcher? Just explain that for us.
It's funny because even when I brought it up as a topic of research during my master's degree, my professors were like, what? I have been able to quantify how much drama there is in the workplace. We can get our hands around the money lost and the time lost and the innovation lost to using poor mental processes, to being played by our own ego, not understanding how our mind works. And so I first came out with research 15 years ago that the average person spends 2.5 hours a day in drama in the workplace, 816 hours a year. Good people doing great work, but suffering unnecessarily.
I'm thinking about all the consultants out there who work in organizations, and oftentimes those people who you're just kind of speaking about right now, who get caught up in all kinds of drama and essentially they're not spending their time as productively as they could. What advice might you offer to a consultant who's trying to really push forward with an initiative or help to create change in an organization, but they're surrounded with or even dealing with maybe one person who is kind of getting lost in the drama, or maybe is not moving forward as productively as they could? Any kind of advice that you've found to be helpful in that situation?
Absolutely. First thing we all have to do is edit our own stories, because we don't see our own drama. We don't see the way our ego is playing us. And so I always tell people, stop believing everything you think. So many in the consulting field are like, oh, that person's the problem. And then they collude with other members on their team or other people's team, and they agree that but the problem is me making up and believing a story about that person. So the best thing you can do first is edit your own story. Well, that person sabotages everything. That person is not yet showing they're on board. We just got 2 projects dumped on us. We have 2 new projects. I think we have to be very clean about editing out our stories and our own suffering so that we can see reality for what it really is. And then the solutions are just really asking directly for what you need and accepting the answer and planning strategies accordingly. But people will spend hours wondering how to get, Michael on board. And they won't just go say, Michael, what do I need to do to get you on board? Mm-hmm. And so as consultants, I think so many times we fuel the drama rather than diffuse the drama.
Love it. You gave a few examples there of kind of the selection of wording in our own minds that you might put out in real life to people. What other encouragement would you offer, or kind of examples? Like if you were to be in that situation yourself, where something is quote unquote dumped on you, right? You're in a bit of a challenging situation. What would you do? What's kind of the best practice in that exact moment? Is there a process, kind of a series of steps for people to go through to kind of think through it, reframe the situation, then move forward in a more productive way?
Absolutely. One of the things I teach people a lot is called edit your own story. So if you find yourself stressed, get your story out on paper, unedited, uncensored, just freelance write what you really think. This isn't to share with anybody. It doesn't have to be professional, but all the uncensored things going on in your head, get it on paper. Then go back and cross out assignments of motive, judgments, assumptions, and get down to just the most neutral statement of facts And so the first question to really apply, and self-reflection is the ultimate drama diffuser, is what do I know for sure? And then the second question is, what could I do next that would help? Critiquing isn't one of the options. Venting is the ego's way of avoiding self-reflection. And then I think in consulting, we've got to help hope make a comeback. And the third question I ask a lot is, if I were great right now, what would great look like? Or if we were great? Because once you get your story edited, as consultants, we can't manage people. We don't own the people, right? We have no power. We're in the business of managing the energy of people, away from why we can't or why we shouldn't have to how we could. And so I think as a consultant, I try and get a clear picture of reality and get rid of my own story through editing it. And I really look at what are multiple positive possibilities here? And let's lead that brainstorming. And people want to give their opinions about why it won't work. I want people to give me their expertise on how we could make it work. And so you're just managing a lot away from collusion and venting and talking about how bad it is one more time. And I call that arguing with reality. You can argue with reality all you want, but it's an argument you'll lose 100% of the time. Yeah. And as consultants, we can get lost in joining the client in wishing things were different. But the value we add is seeing things clearly and then finding that next incremental choice people can make to move their way forward.
I think that's so powerful because what you just shared right now, in terms of kind of self-judgment or just having judgment and really looking at it objectively, it's not just for business. I mean, I see that so applicable to life and relationships. And instead of looking at what's negative in the situation, work together or even just work yourself initially to find what's positive, right? The kind of the difference between being pessimistic and optimistic. I think that's a really powerful kind of framework. So thanks for sharing that there, Sai. I want to now kind of take us back a little bit. 2001, I believe you started your business. Why do you start this business? What propelled you into going out on your own and venturing into kind of the zone of the unknown?
Oftentimes I've been tempted to rewrite history, be kind of a revisionist. And I saw a burning bush and I was called to the field and none of that happened. It was very accidental. I had a reputation when I worked in healthcare for getting teams to turn around different units quickly and get great results. So as my colleagues went off to other places and I went home to tend to my first child, I just got calls and they said, will you come help with this project? Will you come help with that project? And so it was so organic that finally my accountant said, you have to put together an LLC or some way to bring in this income. And so it was really just organic and viral. And it came from me working with people who needed more good work done and didn't have the teams in place that they needed in their new positions. So that was it. I just picked up the phone.
As you were doing that, how do you get your first few clients? Did they just come as a result of people reaching out to you? Or when you actually made the decision, intentionally to go out on your own and start building the business, what did you do to kind of get those first few clients and that initial business coming in?
I have been so lucky in that people reached out to me based on the value I added when I was employed with them. And I think that's the number one thing is that you're not going to go anywhere in consulting unless you can add value. And you add value by doing three things. You perform, and then you stay relevant with the times so that you're on the cutting edge, and you do it emotionally inexpensively. You are the no hassle, easy button. It is one phone call. I'll come in. We'll figure that out for you. And so people started to call me, and then I combined that delivering value with being willing to say yes. I was asked to teach a course at a community college on assertiveness because I started out life as a therapist. And I just was willing to say yes. I didn't look at it transactionally. I didn't look at if I do this, will I get 3 clients or who's the list? I just said yes. And I really trusted that a lot of it would take care of itself. And lo and behold, 2 people in that class worked for Gateway 2000 at the time, loved my teaching, brought me out to do a big contract with women in that workplace. And I see consultants a lot try and figure out whether to say yes to something, doing the transactional math of it, as if I need to be guaranteed that if I do this, this will happen. And the universe doesn't deal that way, in my opinion. The universe deals with, not that you give your work away for free, but when you're first starting out, you do good work for good people, you maintain good relationships. And I never really asked for business. If I had advice now 25 years into this business, I didn't ask for help enough. I didn't go out and ask for the business as much as I could have.
So what would you have done differently? Like looking back now, right? The benefit of hindsight, what steps could you, should have maybe taken different than what you did to create more success or to get more business? Like when you look back right now, what do you think to yourself? Oh, I could have done that differently, or I wish I would have done that differently. What stands out to you as an opportunity or opportunities that you maybe didn't capture at that time?
I would have crowdsourced. I would have picked people's brains. Every person I sat next to on a plane, everyone who hired me or didn't hire me. How did you decide? How does the world work? How does HR figure that out? I played blind in so many cases. I think I probably left so much money on the table, and I could have really grown differently. But I didn't reach out and use professional associations and ask the experts. I'm kind of an introvert. So I would go to conferences, go to the session, and then go to my room and just be like, I'm done with this. And even with my clients and stuff, it never dawned on me to ask them, how do you pick a speaker? And when you hire other speakers, do you pay X amount for their books? So I would have asked a lot more. I would have relied more on a gig economy instead of employing people is the second thing I would have done differently. I would have brought in experts as needed and really gotten a portfolio put in place of like a top team of experts and then let them do their work. My team tried to learn to do graphic design when we could have just hired a graphic designer. And then the last thing I would tell you that was I would trust my gut more. Everyone I met, instead of picking their brain when I would hire them or whether it be in relationship to them, I always thought they sounded smarter and knew more than I did about my own business. And so I defaulted a lot to other people making decisions and with the sense that maybe I can't figure it out or I don't know how to do business. And I didn't trust myself enough. So it's kind of it sounds like it's two opposites. I need to trust myself more and use experts more, if that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people will resonate with that because they likely are in the same situation or at least have felt that. For the introverts listening, or just anybody who might be hesitating to go out and asking for more help or creating more conversations, knowing that, in your case, I don't know if you still consider yourself to be an introvert, but for people who would resonate with that, what advice would you give them? To somebody who feels like, yeah, I gave my talk, now I want to go back to my hotel room. I don't really want to go and introduce myself and do the whole business card thing and all that kind of stuff. What advice would you offer to them, knowing the way that they feel inside? What could help them to kind of step out of their skin or to, expose themselves to new opportunities?
Yeah, I still am an introvert. Targeted strategies, because I would do this all or nothing thing. I'm like, oh, so I have to have dinner with everyone every night in every city that I travel, or it was either or for me. And instead, I need to pay more attention and be intentional. Like, Mel Robbins was like, hey, I love your books. I want to connect with you. And the first time she said that, I didn't even follow up on it, right? And I started to just, when awesome people who I admired said, I want to help you, I started to believe them and take them up on it. So I didn't meet with everybody, but I listened and watched closely the people that were doing things well and the people that made those offers and invitations. And then the second technique I use, it's like almost the Cliff Notes version. I have somebody on my team who's super extroverted, and I just turn him loose. I'm like, go figure out how they do that. And then he gives me the Cliff Notes. He's like, in our one-on-ones, he's like, here's the cool things I found out. Or he'll curate for me, and he listens to 20 podcasts a week. He'll send me the one podcast that he's like, you will love this. So use other people. I have a really good friend, and everything from if she tries a restaurant or makeup, she's very particular. And so instead of me figuring out what to do, I just think about I'll just ask her, what are your 3 favorite restaurants right now? And I just go there. So you can find people that will curate for you and put you in that direction. But I tell you, there are times where, people will say, you've been so successful. It's just so weird. I always waited for you to kind of reach out and like ask me for something, and you never did. And that's where I overfunctioned. And I wasn't vulnerable enough to say, I would love to pick your brain on this. People love to teach you and mentor you.
Totally agree. What was going on in your mind at those times? Like where, I don't know if can you tell me, did you feel like I could reach out to this person, but I won't, or I shouldn't because of X? Like what was the story going on in your mind that you think held you back from reaching out to engage with more people, to ask for more help, to get assistance, whatever it might be? Like if you can kind of take us back into your mind at that time.
That's such a good question. To be honest, in the beginning, I grew up in a very small town in the middle of the United States. Like I didn't even know that was a possibility or an option. So I just kind of grew up like, figure it out, work hard, help others. And so I thought my role was more about helping others and mentoring others. And instead of being both a mentor and an intern, like I focused on giving back. So one, it was like in the beginning, I didn't even realize it. And then two, I underestimated what could happen. I already pre-answered my question. I'm like, well, I'll reach out to them. They're just going to tell me to do this stuff I'm already not doing. I'll read one more book on it. But I didn't get the life hacks that people had or the introduction to the experts. So I would think about reaching out, and then I would already assume I knew how it would end. Like I could predict the future. And it took all the mystery out of it. And it left no room for like that symbiotic cool thing that happens. And then I think there's a level of it for me now that I'm much older, where I think I was a little scared of success. Like there were some things it was convenient not to solve because I could say a little bit of a victim of it.
Can you give an example of that? Like when you say a victim of success, like what's one thing that you felt that way about?
It's like a therapy session, but like growing up in high school and college, I was kind of like the bridesmaid, not the bride. Like I was always the guy's like best friend, but never like their date kind of thing. And so as I got to be a speaker, I'm like, speaking bureaus, when they want you, you don't need them. And when you want them, they don't want you kind of thing. And I just really predetermined when I would think about contacting a speaking bureau that they weren't going to pick me up and that I just wasn't at that level yet. And when I finally, through a friend, he said, reach out, these speaking bureaus want to talk to you. And I finally reached out. They were flabbergasted that they had never heard of me and that I had the book of business I had and that I had never reached out. And so it was more like a playing small or a bit of sabotage. Now, where it became an excuse is I could tell that story all the time about like, well, that sucks. You guys get all these gigs and speaker bureaus will talk to you, but they won't talk to me. And yet I had never reached out. So it was like a convenient, like a shtick I picked up, like a gig that I could be a little victim-y with. And I think we have to watch out for that. I think we all hold on to some problems that we're scared of solving.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful thing for sharing that message. You mentioned earlier that you were very open to taking on work, like at the college you went and did a talk there where you see a lot of people trying to calculate, like, is it worthwhile for my time and how much money will I make? And, being very transactional as opposed to kind of more relationship focused. How has that mindset or the way that you look at saying yes or no to work shifted as your business has developed? Because with many people, at the early days, like you take whatever you can get. Sure, it might not make you as much money, but it's not like people are knocking on your door right at the beginning for many people. So how has that changed now? Like, how do you filter through opportunities? And I'm asking really because I think a lot of people, as they start to receive a lot more interest and demand in their services and their business, they do have to be a little bit more selective in what they say yes to and what they say no to. And so I'm interested, Sai, in how you think about that today.
Sure. I learned this probably too late as I tried to raise kids and I traveled a ton and overfunctioned and was successful. And people kept saying, raise your rates until you get the book of business you want. And again, I think I was kind of scared to do that. I was a single mom at times supporting young kids. And it really got to the point where I was not living a balanced kind of healthy life. And so over time, I've had to look at it, not try and figure out what's the most lucrative business, but one, stay within my core. a lot of people ask me for science projects and I'm like, oh, I could do that. But it's so much work and it never pays off. And people are like chronically disappointed because I'm not the expert in that. And so know what your core is and don't fray much from your core. Like really, instead of going wide, go deep. And then I just most recently will only accept work that feels energy building, not depleting, that I can do joyfully and peacefully. Like I only want today on my calendar what I can do peacefully. And I used to, if there was a free moment on my calendar, that sellable time, sell it. And that's changed for me a lot in what I say yes or no to. I pay a lot of attention. Martha Beck talks about shackles on, shackles off, like try that work on for size and then see if it feels imprisoning or freeing or liberating. And so I've paid a lot more attention to less intellectual decisions about finances and transaction. Now I can do that having been years in the business, and a lot more about heart and the centered stuff. And then I can do it in a way that is legacy and impactful and not just churning through kind of the numbers.
When you say one of the filters for your criteria is like, does it bring me peace or do I feel peaceful when I'm doing that work? What does that look like? I mean, is it a feeling that you look at the work and kind of imagine what it would be like to go through that engagement? Or is there something else going on? I'm just trying to really understand, like, how do you filter that criteria?
So the feeling is more, does it bring me energy and excitement? And do I feel more alive? The peaceful piece is, can I do it peacefully? And what I mean by that is when I look at me starting to get irritated or starting to like not meditate twice a day or not be dedicated to healthy practices, and I started to get irritated and I look at my schedule, I'm like, I am over committing. I can't do that schedule peacefully. Now, it doesn't matter how full it is, because if I have 20 cool things on my calendar and I love every one of them, I can do it with a lot of peace and love in my life. It's more than when I start to be irritable, I start to ignore daily dedications, that it's probably not that I consider each and everything. It's more of a noticing over time and then adjusting and balancing that way.
And so how much of this would you say has come from just experimenting, like being open to trying different things over time and taking on, let's say, a piece of work and going like, yeah, that just really, like, sure, it was great money, but I was pretty miserable, versus taking something on and just like, oh yeah, this is the perfect client, great fit. Here's the criteria of that project or of the client. I want to do more of that. Is that kind of how you got to where you are today? Or is there some other way that you've arrived at this kind of decision-making criteria and kind of selection criteria of what you take on and what you don't?
Yes, a lot of it is coming. One of the things I would tell people they have to get involved in is self-reflection in the day and contemplation, looking for the red thread. Like, when was a good year in my business? When was a bad year? Most of us put our heads down and we do the work and we don't pull back and like contemplate and self-reflect. Danielle Laporte, she talks not about setting goals, but about identifying core desired feelings and how you want to feel in life, and then participating or not participating in work based on, does that bring me closer or farther apart? But you can't do that without a lot of contemplation. And so we like to boil things down in my team to the essence of something, like, what was that lesson learned after some contemplation? And we do a lot of this talking just over a beer at night with my team members. And once we learn it, we like put it into a one-liner. And then here's the next key is you need that mastermind group that will remind you of crap you've already learned. Like, Sai, why are you back out there, like, relearning that? Like, why are you doing research through the book of life out there? And a recent example is there's a couple of clients that we worked with that it was tough work. We earned our money, right? And we called it eyes glaze over, and we've left the land of simplicity. Like, we worked for these people and they tinkered all the time, and whatever we delivered, they just wanted 3 more edits. And it was like, nothing was ever good enough. And it was just like, we were mind boggled. So we boiled that down into watch out for eyes glazing over, return to the land of simplicity, right? And that is code now when I'll start to scope a project with somebody. and they want more calls and they want to explain to me more deeper about their life and they want to tell me how special they are. I have people in my life who just go, Sai, why have you left the land of simplicity?
Right.
And it's those things that because we contemplated, boiled it down, we have mantras in life.
I think that's so powerful. I mean, even from a marketing perspective, oftentimes people are asking themselves, like, what do I need to do? Like, not more, but what do I need to do now? Like, what's the new thing that I need to do? When oftentimes, like right underneath their noses, there's something that's been working really well for them. And so they're trying to look for like something to add. But when you look at most successes, they don't necessarily come from adding new things. It's most often about subtraction and really getting focused on what's working best. So I think that's a really great point.
It's so much about pulling away. People are looking to be fancy and clever. And I'm just like, do not get fancy and clever in consulting. There's the law of diminishing returns and it hits you big time. Get clear standard. The more you can simplify things that are plug and play that people will actually use, the better off it is. We call it instinct or opposite. It's like my instinct is to get really fancy. And that's another one of our mantras. We're like, no, opposite, counterintuitive, do less, not more.
Yeah. So kind of in that same frame, as your business has been built up, right? Started off being you, demand obviously increased over the years. You got busier. I'm interested in kind of your experience with demand and capacity. How have you gone about building your team? Like, can you walk us through
Sure.
the first hire that you made? Who was that person? What did you do next? How does the business look today? Kind of just take us through how you've dealt with capacity and demand at different times in your business.
Sure. So I would tell you that when I just started hiring extra pair of hands and they weren't strategic to deal with increased capacity, it never worked out well. I was hiring out of need and fear rather than like strategy. So my first hire was assistant after assistant after assistant, right? To help me with what they call that lower level work. And what I really needed to hire was a branding organization that helped me name myself. And I needed to raise my rates, take less work and hire branding, the same money, hire not that assistant. And then as I started to really understand that, yeah, I needed a personal assistant as well, but that I needed to not hire based out of, I have too much work. I needed to manage my work for the capacity I had and then intentionally build out what my next capacity would be rather than letting the world and my inability to say no determine where my business went. And so it's like, it was very counterintuitive, if that makes sense.
So I just want to clarify that for everyone and for myself. I mean, are you saying the first kind of step that you took, I mean, aside from hiring a bunch of assistants that didn't necessarily work out, it was about raising your rates, kind of looking out, instead of just finding ways to increase my capacity, let's just first deal with the capacity that I currently have and maximize it. So fewer clients, but higher value per client. That was kind of step one.
Yeah. Because otherwise you're scaling a lower profit. You're scaling like utility work, right? And this was so counterintuitive to me. The difference between selling and order taking, don't just scale more answering the phone. There's a reason you're too busy. You're not maximizing your own value. Raise your value and scale that.
Yeah, I mean, that's so powerful. Yeah, I mean, we do this with a lot of our coaching clients where we look at like, we say you can't scale inefficiency or complexity doesn't scale, right? So before you just try and go and add more, it's like people often say, oh, I need more leads. It's like, yeah, do you really need more leads? Like, actually, let's look at the pipeline. How are things going? Are you winning business? At what price point? Can you, like, all these different things you can maximize and improve first before you go off and just try and add and build more. So, okay, so that was stage one for you.
Stage one. And I've made a lot of attempts at this. This was not a straight path. Is make sure that you're going to build something you want to run, because I don't like running large teams. And I've had experience after experience where if you're scaling something that's low margin, you're not going to make that much more profit and you're going to have a lot more hassle running a big team as a small team. So what I started to do then is to really look at, if I were a true business, what would I put together? And so your hires aren't necessarily more of me, but they were more of how to take what is me and personal goodwill and build it into a brand. And so we worked with Gary Vaynerchuk to take me and digitize and commercialize on that and build a brand, and how to do it smartly instead of hiring all these crews to produce stuff, like just document what I'm already doing.
Right.
And so I got social media. We really focused on some process people. And then once I had my material to a point that I could bring people in, I started to handpick folks that lived the philosophy and loved it and wanted to be out with clients and wanted to do some of my same stuff. So I first hired in is if I were CEO, the staff I would need to if it were a business, then I worked to replicate me. When I could hand somebody a notebook that says, here's our program. So I hired curriculum design before I hired a person to train, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that's actually what I wanted to clarify with you is what were those first few hires when you brought people on? What was their role? Was somebody going out and drumming up more sales? Was somebody developing, as you said, more curriculum? Just kind of paint the picture for us of what were a few of those key first hires that you put in place?
And some were gig and some were employees. So social media, marketing, graphic design, a lot of those were gig folks, from website and different things like that. A heavy marketing, heavy curriculum designer that could help us with our certification programs, an expert in online and virtual training. So I needed technology and I needed marketing and I needed branding. I didn't need more people out speaking. And I thought what I needed was more people out speaking or researching. So, and we only have 7 folks, but we produce with 7 folks and we benchmark against all these other huge organizations. The revenue that we produce with 7 folks, most people are using 15 to 16 folks to produce because most entrepreneurs don't set up systems. And I talk to people, I'm like, do you have a brand guidelines book? If you came to work for me, we would hand you the book. Here's the colors. We use nature scenes. We use this, we use that. Because we think when we go small to small business, we can't do those main functions. And that's the exact thing we should replicate from big business.
Yeah. You're referring to a bit more systems, more processes, SOPs, essentially really standardizing what you're doing so that as you bring new people on, or even for those existing people, they're just able to make everything more and more efficient.
Yeah. Because what happens is, let's say my brand, that you would describe it as navy blue. The first couple of people that I hire, if I don't look at systems, will falsely reflect me and they'll be similar because I'll hire people just like me. I'll go, oh my gosh, my brand's navy blue. But the next level of hires they bring their individual stuff with no systems to support them. It's turquoise blue.
Right.
And I'm like, how did we lose our message? And so instead of using people to scale, I first went to systems. So I'm not endorsing any software, but we went to a couple before this, but then we went to HubSpot so that we don't have individuals decide how to move our deals through a process.
Right.
HubSpot writes you and tells you what you're going to do today. And people are like, well, I could add more value. And I'm like, if you did the 5 tasks on HubSpot, we want you to get fancy and clever with other things, not our systems.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I don't want to leave everybody hanging. You talked before about a shift that you made from kind of lower profit producing offerings to over time changing to things that produced higher revenue or higher profit. Could you give an example of what you did? So if you look back, whether it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, something that you did initially and you thought it was good at that time, but when your eyes opened, you saw a greater opportunity, you made some changes and it allowed you to generate more revenue and more profit. What's kind of the comparison between those two?
Gosh, there's a couple of examples. So speaking and being on big stages is high profit. Plus, if you have systems in place, then you can follow that tail of sales all the way down to training and certification. Well, I would get lost in if the phone rang and somebody needed consulting, I would spend hours on a consulting gig where I really was just an extra pair of hands for somebody. And if I had spent that same time on curating bigger stages, the ultimate revenue of that would be far greater and my reach would be far greater. It feels so counterintuitive because it's not about being busy. It's about doing the right things. And so I would be like, I only have 3 gigs this week. I'm only working 3 hours this week. And my team would go, yes, our plan is working.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So it's things like that. And for me, I had to pay a lot of attention to scalability out of my own personal goodwill. Like if Sai wasn't present, would we earn money? To the point where we even tracked in our metrics, Sai revenue, non-Sai revenue. And I bonused my team on growing non-Sai revenue. So we started to look at how I could be immortal, how if I died tomorrow, no one would even notice. Like, how could I, through virtual trainings and courses and certification and licensure and all of that, really work my way out of a job? Because we feel so valuable when we're the brainiac expert. But when you go to strategically sell your business, there's no value there. You get to die proud that you were a brain. And I think that's so counterintuitive for people is my plan's working when no one asks for me when they call. If you called my business and you didn't ask for me, it kills my ego, but my plan is working.
Right. Yeah.
Answer the phone by accident. And people are like, is Alex there? And I'm like, do you know who you're talking to? And then like, stop. It's like, Alex, there's a call for you. And that's really counterintuitive.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much there that we could really dive into, this whole idea of how to increase the value of your company and the thought of selling. But I want to respect the time that we have here for today, Sai, and thank you so much for coming on. Before we wrap up, where's the best place for people to go to learn more about you and your work? I know you got a bunch of books, but where's kind of home base that you'd want to direct people to if there's one place?
Home base, we live on social media. It's at Sai Wakeman, and you'll get connected into all of our other @. And we have an amazing newsletter. We've kind of gotten out of social media and the algorithms that don't get us to our people. We're back to newsletters now. So if you go to realitybasedleadership.com, we'll flash you a newsletter sign up. We don't sell you stuff, but you'll get great content. So go sign up for our newsletter.
Fantastic. We'll have all that linked up in the show notes. And Sai, again, thanks you so much for coming on today.
You bet. Thank you, Michael, for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.